Sorry for the delay in getting this out. I have been extremely sick this break. It's very sad. And also just been focusing on getting those review posters done for you. However, here is the rest of World War II. Now, it is simply not at a terribly in-depth level. We're really painting in broad strokes here. We are not getting into the details. There are details in the slide deck, which I'm not going to go over. If you want it in more detail, you can look at that. And we're actually not going to talk about the Holocaust really at all in this format. The Holocaust doesn't really feature in the AP test at all. Now, if it's something you guys want to look at in more depth, I'm more than willing to do that with you after the AP exam. I think it's worthwhile, and there's a lot of good material and resources and stuff we can do with that, because obviously we cover it in more detail in contemporary America. However, we're going to kind of focus on two things. Number one, how mobilization of American society impacted the American society, and then the overarching concepts of World War II. It's literally like 15 slides total today. If you want the details of what happened in World War II, sorry, you're just going to have to look at the slides on your own. I'm not going to sit here and lecture for an hour. I mean, my throat's pretty sore right now. So let us begin. So second to last topic in Unit 7 is mobilization. Now, here's the thing. Mobilization in this sense means you are, air quotes, mobilizing your society to fight the conflict. So with the dawn of total war, think back to Sherman and Grant in the Civil War, war is not just between two armies out in the field. It is between two civilizations, two nations fighting each other. And everybody in that nation is a combatant. That's especially true of World War II, where you've got the United States Air Force carpet bombing German and Japanese cities, or the Germans slaughtering Slavic peoples in the East and Russia and other places on the steppes. The Japanese and the rape of Nanking, all these horrific things, which we simply cannot talk about in detail here. However, the big concept for mobilization is it's going to have a ton of knock-on effects on American society. Here's two effects on American society. Number one, women and minorities. So again, just like World War I, women are going to go to work. They're going to all these jobs. So World War I, women go to work for the first time en masse. Then all the men come back. They kind of kick the ladies out of the jobs. They're not very happy about it. World War II starts. Women go back to work, and they're never going to really leave again. So we're going to see a slight regression in women in the workplace during the 50s and 60s. However, it's not going to go back ever to the levels of pre-World War I or just after World War I levels of women not working. So you see this poster here. That's famous Rosie the Riveter. I actually have that in my classroom next to Ms. Furberg. She gave it to me when she left last year. On top of that, and this idea, I mean, as the poster says, we can do it, this idea of female empowerment and that women can accomplish and do anything they set their mind to as a group. This is going to help feed into a growing, I think it's the term would be the second wave feminism. First wave feminism was the group of people like Susan B. Anthony fighting for women's suffrage. Second wave feminism is in the latter half of the 1900s, pushing for things such as workplace equality, sexual equality, and things like that when we talk about the sexual revolution. Third wave feminism, I think I'm using that term correctly, believe this is something I'm not an expert in, is the term used for the current feminist movement of today. Additionally, for minorities, now, not even talking about African Americans, if we're just going to talk about Latino Americans, there's this program called the Bracero. Don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. Program. And what this is, now, obviously, people are out fighting in the war. Back home, especially on the Great Plains and down on the latter half of the states, you need people to work in these giant ranches and gargantuan farms. So the government asks Mexican workers to come up to the country and work in these agricultural jobs. Just like how today, where the vast majority of people working on these giant factory farms are Latin Americans. So we asked them to do this. However, this also brings us into point number 2, is that the war brings these problems of race back into the front of the average American's minds. Now, skipping down that little list I had there, if we're going to talk still about all of the Mexican workers coming up, the country is again confronting its long-standing issues of anti-Mexican, you want to call it racism, want to call it discrimination, call it what you will. So the country is begging these guys, mostly men, to come over here and work in the fields, but at the same time, we're not treating them like they're our equals when they're over here. Racial discrimination, and same then as now, we're asking them to come work in these farms, and then at the same time, we're deporting them. It's this weird kind of dichotomy, which we still see today, where a huge basis of the agricultural economy of this country is based on Latin American labor. But we can't decide as a nation whether we do or don't want these people here, and if we do want them here, in what capacity and in what ways. So it's something we're still dealing with as a nation to this very day, and are still likely going to be dealing with for a whole heck of a long time. Now, going back a little, oh God, I do not feel good. So going back a bit to Japanese Americans. Now, I'd love to spend more time on this. Sadly, this is going to be the only mention of it. So during World War II, Japanese Americans were placed in internment camps. These are almost similar to concentration camps. Not really. I can see Andrew Franklin raising his hand right now. I get it. But conceptually, we are placing a group of people solely based on their race into a camp. Now, the idea, this is the big blot on FDR's reputation. I believe it was Executive Order 9066. Somebody can, Andrew Franklin can correct me if I'm wrong on that in class next week. Was that Japanese Americans were going to spy for Japan during World War II or somehow betray the country. It's farcical, and believe it or not, most spies who worked for the Japanese during World War II were white people, believe it or not, even when you do it per capita. So if you had 1/16 Japanese blood, 1/16, that's insanely, that's like great-great-grandparents from Japan, you were considered unloyal to this country. How many of you, if you had family from Canada or Germany or England, wherever your families come from, if you had a great-great-grandparent who was an immigrant, you, if, like, let's say, here, I don't want to, I know some of you, I think Mallory said her family was from Russia or something like that. I don't know how far back. But let's say, I don't want to use any of you guys as an example here. So I'll use me as an example. My grandfather is an immigrant. He is from Hungary. It's a small country in Eastern Europe. So that would be, if we went to war with Hungary, I would be considered a possible threat to the nation, put in a camp. Now, my children would be still considered a threat to the country and need to go to a camp. My great-grandchildren would still be considered a threat to the country and need to go to an internment camp. So that's how deep it goes. Now, the Supreme Court, when this happens, will uphold this, believe it or not, in Korematsu versus the United States, and say that, yes, this is constitutional because it is a direct threat during a time of war. Again, long history of the Supreme Court making decisions that are not exactly, they don't hold up. They don't hold up today. Now, unfortunately, we never compensated the people that we put in these internment camps. Now, these are not like Nazi Germany concentration camps. People are working, they're fed, they're clothed, they're housed. However, we never, like, we take their homes and we take their businesses and we never compensate. We never even say, oops, sorry. Like, it's really messed up. Now, again, I'd love to go into more detail. Alas, we cannot. Last thing I'll say on this slide is segregation. So this is the 1940s. Some of your great-grandparents, maybe your grandparents, were alive during this time. The United States military is still segregated. So remember, during the Civil War, you had the first African Americans joining the Federal Army, and in segregated units, they're still segregated almost 100 years later. You have black soldiers who are only allowed to serve in black-only regiments, but with white officers. Now, these soldiers were often not seen as good enough, air quotes, to serve in like combat roles, so they were oftentimes not allowed to like serve as like fighter pilots or infantry soldiers or stuff like that. That'll start to change towards the end of the war. You've got a couple famous African American units, Tuskegee Airmen, or the there's this famous tank division. I forget the name of it, that fought in Italy. But here's the thing. Post-war, all of these African-American soldiers who are going overseas are being treated better, like in a place like France, England, or Italy, than they are back home in the United States. So they start to say, yo, what is going on? This isn't fair. We're expected to fight and possibly die for this country, yet we can't even be treated like equals back home. So these veterans are going to form kind of the early foundations of the post-war civil rights movement, which will really kick off in the late 50s, 60s, and into the 70s. So, economically, number one, with the war, inside of the United States, we are going to take off and become such a dominant economic superpower. There is literally nothing you can compare it to. Economically speaking, the greatest time to be a human being was in the post-war United States, from about the 1945 to like 1990. This country, it's so hard to fathom how wealthy that this country was and still is. So starting in World War II, the World War II really ends the Great Depression. Now, it had been pretty much beaten by the New Deal, but not entirely. But World War II, war is good for business, guys. As long as you're not getting bombed and everybody's dying, it's great for business. Millions of people are working. You need, as this propaganda poster is telling you, pour it on. Every plane, every button, every coat, every bullet, every plane, every tank, every gun, everything needs to be made. Now, everything that's being made is a job. Now, people are getting jobs, they're getting paid, and they're taking that money and putting it back into the economy. It is like a self-growing cycle, and it is unprecedented. This will lead us to the economic dominance that the United States is still experiencing to this very day. Now, during this time, it was based upon industrial dominance, like factories, steel mills, things like that, the oil fields. Today, our economic dominance is not so much in that. America is not the manufacturing capital of the world anymore. That's China, Japan, places like that. However, America now, economically, our dominance is based upon like our tech companies, like Microsoft, Apple, things like that. Additionally, if we're talking about the war itself, it is due to our industry that the Allies won the war. There's this very famous agreement called the Lend-Lease Agreement, especially with the English and later the Soviet Union, where we basically give them stuff for free. Like, don't worry about it. We'll worry about payment after the war, and we only expect very little back after the war. It is because of this that the United States gets the nickname, right there, the arsenal of democracy. Now, in Russia, the Soviet Union, 1 out of every 3 bullets that was fired by a Russian soldier was made in the United States of America. 1 out of, I think it was 3 out of every 4 planes was made in the United States of America. Half of all the oil was produced in America. Insane amounts of production in America went to support our allies, and the war would have been lost without that. I mean, it doesn't matter how badly you want to win the war. If you don't get the bullets and guns to do it, you can't win the war. So, World War II in brief. So, sorry. So, oh gosh. The key point to remember is that World War II, unlike World War I or the Spanish-American War, any war since the Civil War, really, Americans are viewing it as a battle for our moral principles itself. World War II is not an imperialistic war we got dragged into like World War I. World War II is we are fighting for what it means to be an American. Now, and against fascism, that term we defined last video. Now, as the war progresses, we are going to be reinforced in that feeling, especially against the Japanese when, our already existing racial biases, the average American feels like, oh my gosh, we were right all along about the Japanese, when things such as the Bataan Death March, the rape of Nanking, or the bayoneting of American prisoners of war is revealed on the home front. In Europe, people didn't really know about the Holocaust, the extent of the Holocaust, I should say. However, Americans still hated Nazis. Nazis stand against everything that it means to be an American. They despise the freedom of religion, the freedom of speech, the freedom of the press. They do not believe in personal rights and liberties. The people are subordinate to the state. Americans viewed the Germans and the Japanese almost as robots, like slaves, just working against their fellow man. Now, the thing is that Americans based their ideas upon are the 4 freedoms. Freedom of speech, freedom of worship, freedom from want, and the freedom from fear. This is FDR is one of his big talking points. But why are we fighting, my fellow Americans? The 4 freedoms. Now, Norman Rockwell is this famous painter who we'll talk a little bit more about when we get to the Cold War. But these are kind of depicted in 4 of these paintings he did. Freedom from want. You might have seen that one. I know you've seen that one on the top right before. It's kind of come back around as I don't want to call it a meme. That makes me sound like an old man, but like a reaction image, So freedom from want. Everybody's happy. They're eating. There's not oh my gosh, are we going to starve? Freedom of speech. This guy's standing up to say what he wants at a meeting. I think he's standing up at a school board meeting. I think that's what the painting is or a town hall meeting, something like that. Very topical. Too bad we weren't talking about this last month. Down on the bottom left, freedom from fear, poor sick kids, then freedom of worship. So, here's the war for you. We win. Congratulations. There's the war. Pretty much, actually. That's all we're going to do. But the reason we win the war is we cooperate with our allies. The Germans, believe it or not, guys, Nazis are hard to get along with. So the Italians, the Germans, the Romanians, the Bulgarians, the Hungarians, the Finns, Japanese, they don't cooperate really. it is these top-down structures where, you've got evil people telling each other what to do. The United States, especially with the British, we really coordinate what we're doing. The overall Allied commander is General Dwight D. Eisenhower. He will go on to become president during the 1950s. As president, he will build our interstate highway system. But technology and scientific advances, nuclear bombs, guys. And at the end of the war, when we use the atomic bombs, this is the start of what we will call the nuclear age. No joke, that was pretty much the whole war, kids, for our purposes. This is just a map of World War II in Europe. This is the extreme length of the Axis advance in Europe. They got almost to Moscow. They almost took the capital. They'll go a little further in the south to Stalingrad, where the largest battle of the ever will be fought in a space of a couple months, well over, I think it's 1 million dead. I'd love... I do not feel good to go into detail with you guys about this. If you want, you can look through the rest of the slides, which I'll post on Google Classroom. But sadly, it's just so far beyond what we need to talk about here. We're not even going to talk about D-Day. We're not even going to talk about that. This is just a map of what was going on in the Pacific theater. We had this strategy which we called island hopping, where, as you'll see, we're kind of skipping island to island to island, finding the different islands that we want to attack and avoiding the ones we don't want to attack. We leapfrog our way across the Pacific over the course of the war to get close to Japan. Now, the original plan was to invade Japan, like a ground invasion. Fun fact, the United States thought that invasion was going to be so deadly that up until about 10 years ago, they were still using the Purple Hearts, which is a medal you get if you're wounded in combat, still using the Purple Heart that they had created for that invasion in anticipation. That's how deadly they thought it was going to be. These are the 2 atomic bombs that were dropped on Japan to end the war, Fat Man and Little Boy. They were dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. So this is Newport, Maine. This is the detonation of Fat Man. As you can see, that really bright area is like the fireball area. Everything's incinerated. Out to this orange area, everything's flattened and on fire. And then out to that gray area is like blast effects, like windows are shattered, radiation, things like that. So we might be thinking, that's all a nuke is? That's not the worst of the world ever. So this is like the very first one, still in a city. It kills a whole heck of a lot of people. But today, and this is why many people at the time, if you've ever seen the movie Oppenheimer, it's rated R, so you probably haven't, but if your parents took you to go see it, I think 2 summers ago, one of the things they talk about in that movie is how people, even the people who made the bombs, were concerned about if you're opening up a can of worms. If you're in Latin, you might have heard of the term Pandora's box, where you're opening up to possibilities that could go either way. This is a map today so that is centered on Newport, Maine. This is the largest detonated bomb ever. No, excuse me, my apologies. This is the detonation for, I believe it's the average Russian nuclear weapon, if detonated over Newport, Maine, what the destruction would be. It literally goes almost all the way to Waterville and Bangor. And then that's just the radiation pouring out from it. Here's some other vocab. Not even joking. That's it for World War II. If you want, I've got the whole... Oh, my apologies. I'll get back to that. Like, the whole rest of the slides are here. If you want to take a peek at it, you're more than welcome to. Graphic images at the very end. But the last thing of note is the United Nations. Now, remember, World War I ends, and Woodrow Wilson founds this thing called the League of Nations. The League of Nations failed to prevent World War II. They failed utterly. They had no powers. So they're dissolved. Towards the end of the war, this new organization is founded, the United Nations. The United Nations is still in place today. Much more successful than the League of Nations. Still criticized by some people, though, as not doing enough to prevent global catastrophes. But they do a lot of good. The United Nations, they have a couple of goals. Number one is that they published the first widely accepted charter on human rights. They try to stop global conflicts and wars, such as the war in Ukraine or what we're doing right now in Iran. They also are the body which prosecutes war criminals. So in the Rwandan genocide in the early 90s, when that genocide is over, the people who perpetrated it are arrested by the United Nations and put on trial. These are the people who are going around to all sorts of places that we would consider to be a part of the third world, like the Congo in Africa, and medicine, food, water, things like that. That's the basis of the United Nations. So, and it kind of is emblematic of an America which is entering into a new age, an interconnected age. The age of isolationism is gone, and unless there's a global catastrophe, fingers crossed there's not, it's not coming back. So the world is connected. Sorry, that was a little rambly. Sorry it wasn't much detail. This is about as much as I can talk right now. I have got I don't even know what I've got. I don't think it's COVID. I've never had COVID before. Superior genetics. I'm kidding. But it's pretty bad. So I hope you've enjoyed your break. Sorry that I didn't get this posted sooner. I could not talk for more than 2 minutes without coughing up a storm. So glad I got through this. All right, I will see you Monday. Bye.